Hello, and welcome to the Studio Yutani podcast. I'm Matt Jarjosa, and I'm joined today by my good friends Justin Macy and Jacob Horn. And today, we're going to be discussing the career of Neill Blomkamp. This is actually our second time doing this video. We ran into tech issues last night and found out this morning the video was completely unusable. But thank you guys for being good sports and coming back and doing this again. So the reason this video started is because Neill Blomkamp recently announced that he is writing the script for District 10. And this has been a long time coming. It's been rumored for a long time. The end of District 9 sort of implies District 10, and of course there's some unresolved issues from that movie that, could potentially set up an interesting sequel. So with that in mind, we can kind of just jump right into it. We're going to talk about Neill Blomkamp's career and his first three films in particular, and seeing what District 10 might have in store for us. I guess I'll just start by saying I think we're all in agreement, right? District 9 is a brilliant film.
Yes.
Yeah, it was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Editing, Best Visual Effects, and Best Adapted Screenplay from the short film Alive in Joburg. And that is quite a feat for a genre movie, because science fiction and genre films almost never get that kind of recognition from the Academy of Arts and Sciences. What are you guys? Yeah.
I can't think of another science fiction movie as of recent to have gotten those type of accolades.
Well, there is one that we can mention when we're talking about District 9.
Oh yeah, that came out in the same year as District 9, maybe.
Yeah.
But
it's worth mentioning,
Yeah.
But I mean, it's also not totally unheard of, because I mean, Aliens is another example. Sigourney Weaver nominated for Best Actress, and that doesn't happen again for genre movies. But
even, I think Arrival caught a couple nominations as well.
Yeah, and Gravity too.
Yeah.
Well,
Gravity is I wouldn't exactly say that's hard science fiction. It kind of teeters on that.
Well,
this is a Blomkamp discussion.
Well, no. I mean, it's good. It's good stuff, though. I mean, the thing about it, the thing about it is, it was kind of with The Dark Knight a little bit, that kind of opened up the category a little bit more. We're starting to see more science fiction films get that kind of recognition, but at the time District 9 was nominated, that was a relatively new thing. You just did not see that, but District 9 is a relatively little film, $30 million, which in Hollywood money, that's not chump change, but it's also not considered like a major studio release. But it made a big splash, and I think, I've watched it periodically over the years, and I revisited it last week for the first time in a while, and it's still, for me, absolutely holds up. It's a powerful, gut-wrenching punch to the face, and though there's some people that have said some of the metaphor that's in the movie is a little bit too obvious, I'm like, that's kind of the idea, I think of it. What do you guys? What are some of your guys' thoughts about D9?
I mean, I just gotta say, I love the movie when it initially came out, and I guess I told you guys this yesterday, but the audience hasn't heard of it. When I first saw this movie, I was fairly young, just because that's when it came out. I was about 10 years old, and then I think I finally got around to seeing it when I was 11. When you're 10, you can't drive to the theater, you can't buy a ticket, you can't do any of that. And as an 11-year-old at the time, it was the greatest movie you could possibly watch, because it was hyper violent, and it had all this grand science fiction in it. So it was enough to keep the little boy entertained. but like there was enough stimulating it to where like I was able to feel something better. And what I really enjoyed about rewatching this was just how entertaining it was throughout and how well its story was told throughout. Like it was a lot of stuff I didn't pick up on when I was younger, obviously, and but it just hit just as hard. It was still that same enthralling experience, but now a little bit more refined to me because I was just able to notice a lot more of the like filmmaking prowess that was at play, especially with, I don't know if we've brought it up yet, but the sort of like documentary angle or just how many perspectives were shown because we're given a lot of stuff through news reports, through like pseudo documentary moments, and then like there are like movie moments, but I don't think there's really a single scene like that's a traditional like on a tripod they walk into a room. You know, it's all from different perspectives at any point, and it just makes it feel so rounded.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good balance, really. The documentary style grounds the movie in a perspective that makes it feel, extremely real. And you were mentioning this last night with the visual effects in the movie are top notch, and those and I forget what company that did it. I think it was primarily Weta that was involved. I could be wrong about that, but the prawns are feel like they're actually there, and you can touch them, and you can feel the environment. They kind of reflect the environment that they're in, which is this very downtrodden and very very dirty, and you can see just the kind of life that they're living. It's a movie that it just reeks of detail, and it builds a world without having to explicitly tell us what it is. We feel it. What are some of your thoughts on it, Justin?
Yeah, I'm coming at it from a kind of a different perspective, just because I'm not a big science fiction fan, to be completely honest, and I hadn't seen the movie until just recently preparing for this podcast, and I really liked it. I thought that, the cinema verite style was a good departure from what you normally see in a mainstream science fiction movie, and the down and dirty nature of it, like you're talking, that really sets it apart from, I think, a lot of other science fiction.
Yeah, no, it's what's kind of interesting about it is it keeps that documentary style throughout, even when it starts to kind of go into more traditional narrative territory. It sets the stage very well with it, and you never lose that. The story of it, though, I think is really where the movie really wins people over. It's the main character, Charlotte Copley's character, Vickis Demir, was it Demir? Is it
Vandemir?
Vandemir, thank you. I knew I was like missing a syllable, but Vickis is the head of this, or he's leading this. They're trying to like switch the relocate these aliens to a different district, a different slum, and that's kind of interesting. Getting the themes of the movie, I mean, right away we're hit with like all the social commentary, because we have these refugee aliens, and all of a sudden it's like, well, we have to do something with them, and it becomes a pretty blatant social commentary with regards to like racism and the apartheid in South Africa and classism and all that. But what I really love about it is that we have this great character in Vickis, who's really at the beginning, he's this he's an idiot racist and casual racist. I
want to say,
yeah,
it's interesting, his transformation, because I know you're going to start talking about the physical metamorphosis, but in that first 30 minutes, there's a very interesting shift of Vickis too, because he is cowardly and kind of unbeknownstly bigoted at the very, very beginning, but as they start the relocation process, if you notice, he starts to get more giddy as he goes along. Like he's starting to like get into it, see a bit of the excitement. Like, you know, at first when he'd try to move a prawn out, he'd, you know, start talking to them like very kindly, like, listen, sir, I got to get you to leave your house here. But then by the end, he would just be like, hey, you want to, you know, you want to fuck around, talk with this guy, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you can just see even in that, I think it also just goes to show an interesting thing about, I guess, racism and prejudice in general, is that it is environmentally based in the sense where, like, when Vicus is in that office setting, everything he's told gives him that kind of cowardly, bigoted mindset. But it's not until he gets into the field and is essentially encouraged that mindset by just the groupthink of all the MNU agents, you know. So it's another thing that like, again, the movie, you know, its message may be obvious. There's a lot of little things like that just hidden within it that can be poked and prodded at and pulled out, and you can really look at it and, you know, think what you know, you can take away stuff with it.
Yeah.
I really admire the thematic depth of the movie, because you could interpret it at a very basic level as, you know, racism is bad, but it really shows a much more complicated picture of racism and you know, segregation.
And you know, just kind of how, you know, prejudices can really inflict you know, certain groups of people. And you know, it shows the complexity of how these types of environments are created. And to me, that is really what contrasts it with the film we were talking about earlier, or hinting at, which was Avatar. And no disrespect to James Cameron or Avatar, I think it's, you know, I think it's a solid movie for the most part. But if I had to like look at these two science fiction films from 2009 that are kind of dealing with these similar issues about you know, prejudice and whatnot, I think hands down District 9 kind of you know, deals with those themes in a much more engaging and much more interesting way that a $30 million film probably could, and a $300 million film probably could not.
Right, District 9 explores the complexity of the issues, while Avatar paints a very, you know, here's the right thing, here's the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Avatar,
black and white.
Yeah, Avatar is definitely, and I feel like, you know, if James Cameron was here himself, he'd probably agree with us.
Yeah.
Avatar is definitely a much more romanticized vision of how to tell that story, if you will. Like, you know, not to say that things aren't dirty and gritty in the Avatar universe, but it's not District 9.
Yeah.
Where, like, Na'vi is not, like, shot in the head, execution style, in, like, a point-blank close-up.
Yeah.
You know, but you see that happen to prawns left and right.
Yeah, and it's just casual. Like, it's not big.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just something that happens, and it's like
it's just it's the one guy. Oh God, what he kind of acts as like the main human antagonist.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I don't remember his
bald.
name. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I don't remember his name.
But he definitely gives off that, like, he strikes me as like one of those guys that they talk about in like Vietnam and like real harsh war settings. The guy who starts to enjoy it too much, to the point where it's like, this is your vice. Like, that you would somehow do this no matter what, but you are now being given free reign.
Well, and that's
kind of what it felt like.
Well, and that's also kind of like what you're saying earlier with Vicus. It's like, once he's out in the field, he starts to kind of really get a hold on, like, oh man, I'm actually a powerful authority figure, and I can embrace this, and nobody's stopping me. And I got all these guys with guns backing me up. And it's all like pointing to how, you know, these systems that we've created, you know, uphold, you know, prejudices. But
I also like little like pokes at like bureaucracy, like when they find the eggs. Vicus is like, we need to call down a population control unit. The population control unit is a guy with a flamethrower.
Yeah.
Like, and he just burnt, like, you know, it's like, it's very dark, but it's also very like satirical in that, where it's like, bureaucracy will just cover things with like BS names.
Yeah,
To,
yeah.
like, hide the harshness.
Yeah, yeah, it's just, and again, just kind of the brazenness of it all is it's really twisted in a way, and it does kind of evoke a little bit of Paul Verhoeven, just the absurdity of cruelty in a way. But I think what I really love about District 9 and what really kind of grabs me about it the most is the journey that Vicus has in the film, and the kind of relationship he develops with the Christopher Johnson character in the movie. I think the idea of him mutating physically into one of the aliens was probably one of the strongest possible storylines they could have come up with, because immediately it thrusts Vicus into the other side of the aisle, and he is forced to confront the reality of what he and other people like in his position in life have put upon these aliens. And it's to me it's almost kind of like Blade Runner 2049 in a way, where it's like, for me, that film is like the perfect sequel to Blade Runner, because it's like, what's the next step from we're dealing with replicants? It's like, well, what if the replicants actually reproduce? Then there's like, all of a sudden there's no barriers between them and humanity. In the same way, I think having this storyline where we have a racist that is being subjugated to the racism that he's fostered is just an amazing,
on an extreme level.
Yeah.
As well too. It's like,
yeah,
it's hyper dumb.
Yeah. No, and I think that, I think that adapted screenplay Oscar nomination was very well deserved.
The physical transformation on Vicus too. I know we were commenting about how good the visual effects, the computer generated effects are, and those are amazing too. But all the transformation on Vicus was prosthetics. Everything, the arm, the flipper, like, all up to him. I think the only instance of it is at the end, like his eye, they made a bit bigger.
Yeah.
Like, just because, I mean, that one makes sense. You can't make his eye bigger, you know?
Yeah.
But, so, again, like, a really standout movie on all accounts because of that.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. And then, so going through the story of it, though, we do end up kind of having this Christopher Johnson character and Vicus have to get back this fluid that was stolen by MNU, and it's there's been some complaints about the third act being a little bit too much like action, but for me, I wasn't bothered so much by that, because again, I'm a story guy, and as long as there's a story there and it's hitting the right beats, I'm like, I'm not really like action is fine. Sometimes you just need a thrill, but I really feel like District 9's action scenes were a lot more baked into the story of it. My thought. Do you guys have any thoughts about that?
I'm one of those people who, the third act action always kind of puts me off to a movie, but I agree that there was enough. It was related enough to what was happening in the story that it didn't bother me as much as a lot of other movies of this genre do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would have to agree. The action did start to wash over me a little bit, especially because there's like decent amounts of action throughout the whole movie. If you really think about it, like, it's always tough. I always kind of define, like, there's like sequences of action, and then there's like an action scene. Like a chase, I'll normally consider that a sequence of action. So we have a lot of those type of stuff throughout the movie, but the actual action at the end, when it goes full video game mode with mech suits and lasers, I had fun with that, still, even though maybe trim out like 5 minutes of it. That's I think there was just a bit, like, a minor complaint would be remove 5 minutes of it at a point. It's like I always think about, like, in a Michael Bay movie, where like the stories and characters aren't great, but I really do enjoy like the visceral nature of his action, and I felt a lot of that in District 9. But again, like a Michael Bay movie, I also felt like some of that visceral action could be cut, and it would pack a tighter punch. You know,
I don't disagree with that, but I also think.
but there's still head explosions in District 9, so like I'm happy, you know.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree, but I guess for me, it's almost like we were talking earlier about kind of the balance of like the themes and the story, and I'm like, to an extent, it's like you do have to kind of deliver on genre expectations because you are going to have those 10 and 11-year-olds that want to see an action movie, and yeah, I feel like the movie successfully delivers on all those fronts.
Oh yeah, and it is like story justified. It's baked in. It's all like every piece of alien technology, like every weapon that's fired, you see it multiple times beforehand, like before it's even like used as a weapon. Like you see this background, it's confiscated. You see it in a news report. So it's not like any of this equipment comes out of nowhere. You know, it's not like it's suddenly like, we need an action scene. I've been hoarding these weapons this whole time. It's like, no. We get this world. We get how it is.
Yeah, it sets itself up very well. So, yeah, I think it's very well done. Kind of laying the seeds for the discussion we're going to have at the end. The movie ends on an interesting note because we formerly had Christopher Johnson and Vickus breaking into MNU to steal back the fluid so that Christopher Johnson could get his ship running and get back up to the mothership. But then, and to help Vickus really is primarily was the initial thing. But then once he sees the behind the scenes horror at MNU and what's going on, Christopher Johnson's mission changes, and now he's like, okay, now I actually need to go. I need to use this to go back to my planet. And
I personally think, real quick, that Christopher was lying to Vickus about saying he was going to help him. Yeah.
Ooh.
I think he just needed the fluid. And I think it's an interesting thing because it's funny because Vickus and Christopher don't like each other right away.
Mm-hmm.
They actually spend most of the movie not exactly understanding each other's plight. They're just trying to use each other for benefits. So I do think that Christopher was just like, the only way I'm going to get this asshole to even like tell me where MNU's headquarters is, let alone take me there, is if I promise him the impossible. Because I understand they're an advanced alien race, but what type of advanced alien race would have the ability to like why would they have that technology to undo their own DNA? You know what I mean? Because they wouldn't need to revert themselves.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. The only thing where I think it can be a little bit ambiguous, though, and it is ambiguous, of course.
I think it is, no matter
but
what. Yeah.
Is also. But there's also this notion is like, why did the fluid start to transform him into a prawn to begin with? Yeah. So, who actually knows what the truth is? But I do think that's a valid theory.
We don't know what the fluid is. I think the normal human assumption is that it is some type of fuel, but I do not agree with that. I think because odds are, like, those things would not take like liquid fuel. You know what I mean? I guess we're talking about science fiction technology, so you don't know. Mm-hmm. But I always would assume that it would be, again, more like battery powered. And again, if it's a tiny vial of fluid, I don't know.
Well. Also, we got to remember
I think it might have some stabilizing agent for the battery or something along those lines. You know what I mean? Something to not.
Well, another we can't gloss over another big part of the movie is the fact that the aliens' technology is intrinsically linked with their DNA. So,
it is true.
So there's that's another kind of clue, I guess you could say. Did you have anything thoughts about that, Justin?
No.
We kind of covered all our bases, huh?
Yeah.
But well, kind of what I was saying earlier though is the movie ends Christopher Johnson taking the mothership back to his home planet, and with the promise he will return in 3 years to help Vicus, and that's kind of where the movie ends. And Vicus, fully mutates into one of the aliens, and we don't know what happens to him. And I think it's an interesting film because it concludes, but it also leaves a lot of questions that are open for a sequel. So District 9 was a huge success. Blomkamp comes into the scene. Big splash. He's now in Hollywood, and they give him a bunch of money to make whatever the hell he wants next. And the next movie that he makes is a Matt Damon film called Elysium. And I think we all kind of agreed about this one. This was it was kind of a dud, unfortunately. Yes. I would, being kind of charitable, I make the argument that it's like if you were just some lay person who wanted to see a Matt Damon action movie and you've been to go see Elysium, I don't know if you'd be disappointed by it per se, but but for people that are looking for a follow-up to District 9, it's hard to not be disappointed by it. It's if you want to talk about the social commentary in District 9 being too on the nose, I think in Elysium it's a little bit, it's almost too simple in a way.
Elysium lacks those details.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole talk of the slight evolution of bigotry, and none of that exists in this. It's like you're either rich and good or no, you're either rich and bad or poor and good.
Yeah, and there's very little in between. There are some some broad strokes, like we talked a little bit about the Kruger character sort of being an in-between person, but it's painted very broadly, and I think that's probably where the movie just doesn't. That's the movie's downfall, because you were saying with the opening, and it's it opens with Matt Damon's character as a little kid.
And it's just grown worthy.
Yeah,
because it's oh boy, this is what we're getting into right away.
Yeah, and
I always wanted to go to Elysium.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, it's just what kind of movie it is, and it's so. Yeah.
And while District 9 was a movie that explored themes, Elysium was a movie that stated themes.
Yes.
I think that's a big division there.
Yeah, it's definitely it's playing on the notion of the haves and the have-nots, which again, kind of doing what I was saying earlier. If you were just going in to see a Matt Damon movie, you might be like, huh. Okay, it's got something a little bit to say about classism, and expectations play a huge role in how a movie's received. So, I mean, there might be people who went in, just with that, but I don't know. Even for me, though, even if I'm not necessarily expecting District 9, I honestly kind of found Elysium hard to sit through. I started to trail off about partway through, and
I remember this one and Chappie were not received well, so my expectations were kind of at the door for both of them, in the sense where it was I wasn't walking in going, these are going to be some trash ass movies, but I also wasn't walking in going I bet these are some unhidden gems. It was just no. Mm-hmm. I'm going to watch them, see how they were, and Elysium was kind of as bad as everyone had said.
Yeah,
I would say it's just it is very bland. It's like cornflakes, without milk. It's you eat it and you're chewing, but you're not tasting anything.
Yeah.
Very good comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm watching a movie. I mean, there's some really we talked about this a bit yesterday. I think it must be said that the design teams on these movies, they all do a fantastic job. like whether it be like physical sets, and Elysium had a lot of like giant physical sets that were really well done, and even like the mech suits were like practical, and props to all those people. However, the movie that all this stuff is like hanging it on has no real like anything going for it.
And that's super unfortunate because
Yeah.
the production design is brilliant, and that's and I was also saying this too. It's like in a way it's like the second movie kind of solidifies a director to an extent, and between Elysium and District 9, you can say, okay, these both feel like a Neill Blomkamp movie.
He definitely has a distinct visual style.
Yeah. And
idea about putting themes front and center.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But using science fiction to kind of explore those themes. But the problem with Elysium is that what you were saying, Jacob, is what the movie is actually hanging on just isn't there. It's like stacking some foam core on top of some toothpicks. It's a very, very flimsy. It's almost in a way it's like super digestible garbage. I found it like I said, I started to kind of trail off watching it. I don't even fully remember what happens in Act 3 of the film.
I gotta say, like, and again, these were like two ridiculous things I brought up yesterday, and they were just like grown moments. And I don't want to. I remember we were kind of tearing this one apart yesterday, but we're fucking doing it again. Sorry, Blomkamp, if you're watching this.
Only has to watch it once.
Yeah, but one thing that was like just like grown worthy was Jodie Foster. This movie is so Hollywood cliche that Jodie Foster's literal motivation is she wants to hack the system to become the president.
Yeah.
So like that's our villain's actual plot. They want to become the president of the not the United States, but essentially of Elysium. So basically the
world,
whatever's left.
Yeah. Whatever.
The other was a Kruger, who is Sharlto Copley, who's great in all these movies. Again, that needs to be stated. And I think he's great in this one because he's the only character that's like really outrageous and like funky in a science fiction world. Everyone else is like pretty bland.
Yeah.
But his face gets blown off, very literally. Like his entire head blows up. He gets a grenade to the face, and then they put him underneath like the tanning booth from heaven, and it reforms his entire face, and he's just alive again.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're not. By the way, Blomkamp must be like a staunch atheist based off of this and Chappie. Like, just saying, like he must be one of those guys. Like, you are wires and your brain is chemicals. You reform the chemicals. It's you again. Because his face gets blown off and he's brought back to life, and not a single person brings up anything about like
the efficacy,
the implications of that.
The efficacy isn't really explored in any meaningful way.
I'm gonna bring up the same thing I did yesterday with Chappie. Sorry guys, you get to hear it again.
Sure.
But it's just in Elysium you could say like, oh, it's such a cold, callous future society. It's like 2154 that they could just be past that. Like ethically, they're so ruined they don't care.
Yeah, but no, and we'll get into Chappie a little bit. I'm a little bit more charitable with that in Chappie, but the thing with Elysium though is it feels extremely Hollywood, and I think there is some sorts of Blomkamp like talking about. Blomkamp has said he doesn't like how Elysium turned out, so we need to make that clear. To me, what it ultimately feels like is this. District 9 made a huge splash, and all of a sudden, Neill Blomkamp was this big name, and you got studios that want to throw a bunch of money at him. He went from a $30 million film to a $130 million film, and honestly, it kind of feels like this is a director, started out as something small, and it's like, I want to make my Hollywood movie now, and this is how I have to do it. This is what people expect to see from that kind of movie, and possibly in that process maybe straying away from what the person actually kind of believes in a little bit. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I would completely agree with that. Yeah, it feels like it it kind of lost it doesn't have the soul of his other movies.
Yeah.
It's a lot of surface, and that's what you get what you pay for. You got $130 million worth of surface there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I think we've kind of covered all our bases with Elysium. Um, the movie that he made next, and this is a fascinating one because I don't know if we were necessarily all on the same page about it when we were talking about it last night. It's Chappie, and this film was absolutely ravaged. I think it's only at like a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. And honestly, I think that's unfair. I turned on this movie for the first time in since 2015. I hadn't seen Elysium before last week. But I watched this movie again for the first time in 6 years, and I found it quite enjoyable. It's kind of like this really kind of wacky, dark fairy tale in a way. It's like RoboCop meets Short Circuit, but it's got the visual style of the D. Antwoord. Yeah, that's in it. What do you? To me, Chappie. I'll say this, and I'll let you guys kind of give your thoughts on it. It's like, for me, it's like Chappie is like eye candy, and it's all character, and and that, for me, the atmosphere of it is really kind of what makes it successful. But what are you guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I would definitely agree because what you said, the highlight is character, not so much for like story narrative. Not to say that it's like it's not like an Elysium where it's like a generic story. It's just a story where it's like some beats don't necessarily line up in ways you'd want, but all the characters, the title character of Chappie really does hold it all together. I don't think that was something that we like stressed enough last night, or I feel at least, but like it really is held together by both the visual effects of Chappie, because again, much like District 9, um, Chappie, at any moment he looks real. You never doubt it. You can feel him. You can every single part of it, all the gears that move, all everything makes sense, and you can just like it's very pliable. And then also Sholto Copley,
Yes.
just how he plays it physically, and how even his voice and just the way he acts and bounces off of the other performers, like truly with like a childlike innocence. And it's a kind of a tough role to knock to pinpoint down, like as an actor, like childlike innocence, but like but you're being gangster, but you know everything because you're a robot, and yeah, so it's a lot to balance, and he does it well.
Yeah, I think he's fantastic, and honestly, I kind of forgot that he was even in that role for a while. Partly because I didn't actually physically like see his face, but but he it can't be understated how good of a job he does in that movie as that character, and it does say something though. And again, I keep on going back to this notion of Chappie as a fairy tale. It's a fantasy in a way, because in some ways it's kind of a fairy tale interpretation of like the direction that AI is going. And to me, it's like how artificial intelligence doesn't know how to do anything except for what we tell it what to do. Except what we program it to do. And in this movie, we get a lot of different conflicts of interest. You get Dave Patel, his character that's really just trying to make this program work, and he's trying to kind of teach Chappie as if he was a child and see if I can get this robot to act human. And then you get D. Antwoord's Ninja and Yolandi that are trying to turn him into a gangster, and all the way he's being led in all these different directions, but and he accepts those explanations as a child, because he's only doing what he knows how to do. But then by the end of the film, really has to sort of take charge, and I think it's I think it's an interesting journey, and certainly I found it much more entertaining and much more engaging, and frankly, in some ways, I found it a lot more wonderful than Elysium. What do you guys?
Oh yeah, for certain, and definitely, yeah. Justin, I think you were gonna.
I just wanted. I remember yesterday you mentioned the bureaucracy storyline being pretty flimsy.
Yeah, it's very very stock. Like,
yeah, but apart from that, there was so much good stuff in this movie that made up for that aspect kind of lacking.
Yeah.
Especially with the character of Chappie, and all his interactions with the other actors are just phenomenal.
Yeah, you were mentioning
some really great scenes play out throughout the whole movie.
Mm-hmm. I agree. You were mentioning last night that the marketing campaign for the film was a bit of a misfire. You felt.
Yeah, when I watched it, I was anticipating a movie where Hugh Jackman teaches a robot how to box.
Wait,
I don't know.
That movie's called Real Steel.
Oh! Did they come out around the same time?
I think they were a few years separated.
I think,
okay.
but that's really funny though.
Yeah. Okay, that explains what I was thinking of. But yeah, I was anticipating a Hugh Jackman movie, and I was really surprised when Hugh Jackman played a very small role.
Yeah, kind of like what I was saying. It's very very stock drama. It's like Hugh Jackman is the bad guy in this, who wants to get his robot on the market. Chappie, we've been talking a lot about like a lot of the surrounding elements of Chappie, the production and design, the performances and the characters, but and I think part of the reason for that is because the story of Chappie is pretty basic in a way. Yeah. It's like Chappie is a police robot. There's out of a line of police robots, and Hugh Jackman's character has developed a different kind of police robot that nobody wants because it's huge and hulking and impractical, and he's basically trying to manufacture a situation where he can really test run and show people what his machine can do. And I think all of that really is just in service to putting Chappie and the other characters up on a pedestal so that we can see those relationships develop, and that's really where the heart of the movie is.
Yeah. The Hugh Jackman stuff. Hugh Jackman himself, I think, like Hugh Jackman's one of those actors who gives it all, even if he's in like a subpar movie. Again, the whole cast is great, but like at the end when he has his own Ed 209, it feels a little contrived. Like, I don't know. I almost feel like the movie would have worked better if the climax was Chappie involved in like just more like gang warfare. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Not fighting a big hulking robot, but if it was like, okay, like, because honestly, I think it'd be real badass to see Chappie just lay out a bunch of humans, because he could, essentially. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But fighting the Ed 209, it's just kind of like, shoot at the big thing enough.
Yeah. I think what could have been interesting on that note is, like, what if Hugh Jackman, instead of his plot to, like, shuts down all the other police robots, what if he actually, like, struck a deal with, like, one of the rival gangs and set up something with them?
Like, listen, I tell you what, instead of shutting down the police, because that makes really no sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to go too far into that, because it's like, buddy, they're gonna track you. Like, you did it in company HQ. Like, they're gonna be like, damn, let's track the signal of when every single police robot, every single super important $1 million police robot was shut down. Oh, It's from Hugh Jackman's fucking desktop in the basement. Like, buddy, they're gonna get you. But yeah, that'd be more interesting if it was like he played the rival gang aspect. Like, okay, maybe giving them some like advanced technology, maybe some access to their own type of police bots. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that,
I don't disagree with you at all. I just think for me, the reason probably why I'm willing to look the other way on some of this, and I know you've got a rant that you're ready to go off on. Is again, I feel like Chappie is kind of a fairy tale in some way, but
yeah.
do we? But let's talk about one of the most controversial parts of the movie. It's the end.
Yeah. So I'm actually,
Yeah.
I guess I want to preface before this. I am actually overall I would feel like I had a positive experience with this movie. I was thoroughly entertained, thoroughly invested. So, like, I was never checking out mentally. Like Elysium, I was checking out mentally. Like, I'm not going to go as far as to say I was gripped, but I was definitely invested the whole time. The ending really bothered me because I just have this problem with science fiction in general, or I guess not even science fiction because it can be done in fantasy and fairy tales and the like, but where like consciousness is given to a new body or being. Like at the end of Chappie, Dave Patel's character is shot and killed, so they transfer his consciousness into a robot body, and then it's like a happy ending, like he's back. That is a horrifying, cold, and callous ending to me because it's like the debate, like you need I feel like, and I almost feel like it's never been done before in a movie, and or if it has, somebody please inform me, to where they really dive into the aspect of, because like I don't want to get too ethical or religious on you guys, and I'm not much of a religious guy in general, I don't want to give that impression, but just like I think that angle needs to be looked at when we're talking about switching consciousnesses over. Because if there is such thing as a soul, if we are more than just chemicals in our brain, which I tend to think, I'm not even going to go as far as to say via what spiritual methods, but I do think that we need to address that maybe there's more than just, chemicals going on.
Yeah.
But it's just like the whole transferring of consciousness, I would assume that the person is dead. The initial one is dead, and that robot is just a copy. And so like the happy ending to me doesn't register because it's never brought up. Like and it's just it just puts me uneasy because it's like we need to have that discussion about, well, wait a minute, isn't that other person, like, shouldn't they be dead? And also, bummer for Dave Patel, he's put in like a penisless body. What is he supposed to do his whole life now? Like seriously, he's got like some like robot flat crotch now. Like poor guy.
He can't write more computer programs.
Yeah, maybe he could, but like what? What's he now? He has to like invent a tongue so he can taste pizza. Like, you know what I mean? Like he's got to figure that all out, and it's like,
Yeah,
I bet the ambulance could have patched him up.
No, I think it's. So Chappie was supposed to be a trilogy. Do you think if they managed to go in that direction, do you think they might have explored some of those issues a little bit more?
I would have liked if they did, but again, this is kind of my comment about like how I think Blomkamp's probably a very staunch atheist, and I don't mean that against him, but I just mean in the sense where he probably is much more the thought process of like your brain is your brain and you are your brain, because again of like the whole Elysium thing, like he's brought back to life and it's not discussed.
Yeah.
Their consciousness are switched and they're not discussed, so maybe it'd be brought up, but part of me thinks he's just not interested in telling it in that way. At least that's not how he would see it.
Yeah,
again, who knows?
Well, for me, and Justin, I'd like to get your thoughts on this as well. But kind of for me, when I first saw this movie in 2015, I was kind of groaning. I wasn't really like upset or offended. I was just more like they're doing the transfer of consciousness thing. I just felt it was just, I almost felt like it was just like too. It's it's unrealistic because it's like we don't at this point in time have any way of like transferring like brain signals into binary code. We don't have any kind of process for doing that. So to think that Chappie just sort of came up with it on accident it was kind of absurd to me. But
yeah, it's a Deus ex machina.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing, and again, the reason why I let it go this time is because I really saw the movie as a fairy tale, and it has that kind of fairy tale ending through the lens of science fiction.
Yes.
And in that in that kind of sense, to me, it didn't bother me as much. Maybe it was also partly because I kind of remembered and I was anticipating, but I also was like able to look at it as like I don't know if it's tonally inappropriate for the film. Did you have any thoughts about that, Justin?
I mean, I think it's definitely contrived.
Yes.
Yeah, and I had enough fun in the middle of the movie that it didn't bother me at that point.
Yeah.
You know, but I could definitely understand any complaints about it just kind of coming out of nowhere and solving all the problems.
Yeah. It in that sense, yeah, I agree. It is kind of a Deus Ex Machina. It's not really set up earlier in the movie at all. But Chappie was pretty savaged by critics and audiences, and I think it's clear, even with our misgivings about the film, it's not. We don't think it deserved that kind of.
I had, if people who have seen the movie would actually notice that pretty much all of our complaints come from the final 30 minutes, like, exclusively. I would say I don't think a single one of our complaints really extends beyond that, other than maybe like some like plot elements that kind of weave throughout the whole narrative. But yeah, I think yesterday we even said this is like a cult movie in the making. Mm-hmm. And I could definitely see by 2025, the movie's 10-year anniversary, that people would be looking fonder on it again. Maybe not to the level of like a obviously not like a Blade Runner cult movie, which is arguably not even a cult movie anymore, but
right.
Definitely more along the lines of like just, I don't know, like a Sunshine.
Yeah.
Because like that's a movie that's not like super old. It's like 15 years old, but like, not many people know about it, but the people that, truly stick with it love it. And I think it's definitely has a lot in mind for that, like for that type of reception.
No,
that to be its legacy.
I think Chappie might already kind of have something of a cult following, but I can definitely see it growing in a few years' time. Did you guys? I'm gonna kind of move on to the next. Did you guys have any final thoughts about it at all?
Yeah. Sorry, real quick, final thoughts, because there's just something I said yesterday, and I just kind of want to say it again. I did have some expectations for Chappie, where I thought I was going to absolutely despise Ninja and Yolandi.
Yes.
Because I remember I don't know anything about D. Antwoord, but I'd seen them in promotional material. I'd just seen what they looked like, and I knew they were like the people who were going to raise Chappie. And I was kind of anticipating it to be like grating and unbearable, but both Ninja and Yolandi were very good in the movie.
Yes.
Ironically, I had a lot of fun watching them, and I was at the end of the movie empathizing with them. Yes. I don't even really know why I empathized with them, because they were horrible people. I think it was just they had some bizarre charisma with them and Chappie
they were very charming.
Yeah. Oddly charming. And that's kind of the whole thing with Chappie. Chappie is an oddly charming movie. And I think D. Antwoord are definitely kind of central to that kind of, as you said, charisma that the film has. And I kind of feel the same way a little bit. I wasn't sure what to expect, because you have Ninja and Yolandi kind of playing these versions of themselves, these fictional versions of themselves, but they are excellent in the film, both of them. They truly do a good job. Unfortunately, though, Chappie again was savaged and it also did not make a ton of money. I don't know if it was a flop, but it didn't make a lot of money. So that was kind of the point where Blomkamp was. I don't know if it goes. It might be a bit of extreme to say he was excommunicated, but he was kind of cut off from Hollywood in some way. Made a big splash with D9, and then he made 2 subsequent films that were not as well received, and people were like, "Get out," and that's unfortunate. But it kind of leads into the kind of next part of his career, and we didn't watch any of the films, the short films that he made with his Oat Studio, but from what I understand about those and what I've heard about those, they're quite good, and they're good enough that they were able to attract some pretty big stars, like Sigourney Weaver, who was in Chappie, is in, I think, at least 1 or 2 of them. So
I think Clive Owen's in one of them.
Oh, is he? Yeah.
It's Clive Owen, right?
Yeah, Clive Owen. Yeah. Like.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. From Children of Men, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why I was for a minute I was like, did I say the right guy? All right. Anyway, sorry about that, everybody.
No. No. I unfortunately, I wish we had a little bit more to say. We didn't really explore these films a little bit too much, but word of mouth suggests that they are worth checking out. So we should probably do that at some point in the future. But I do think
Part 2.
Yeah, part 2. But I think there is a wisdom to that. It's like, everybody who wants to go into filmmaking, and the 3 of us are all filmmakers, everybody wants to make a feature film, because that's where the business is, that's where the money is. But the wisdom of filmmaking and what makes a really great movie is most often found in the short film format, and that's really where you hone your skills a bit. It's how Blomkamp started out, and in a way, I kind of feel like with those 3 films, with D9 through Chappie, it's like District 9 was, and you know, who knows what's really kind of going on in his head. But for me, I feel like District 9 is a pure Blomkamp film in the sense that, like, this is what he wants to make, and then with Elysium, he did what Hollywood wanted to make, or what he thought Hollywood wanted him to make, and then Chappie, in a weird way, is kind of a mix of both things. But I feel like in that journey, we kind of see a filmmaker who maybe kind of lost his voice a little bit, and by returning to the short film, is kind of about trying to find it again.
I could also see it as being like a lot of an issue that I think you could point at Chappie and Elysium and say is that there were a lot of like ideas and plot concepts that aren't strong enough for a feature, but were strong enough for a short. So who knows? Maybe he took a bit of a note from that and is like going back. You know.
And it seems to have worked out for him, because the Oak Studio stuff is very well received. We kind of were all over the place with it last night. I don't know if we're going to do the same thing, but one of the big points of his career, post those 3 movies, was his Alien film that did not get made, and there's a lot of mystery surrounding that project and how it came about and what ultimately happened, because there's like this behind the scenes dance between Blomkamp, Ridley Scott, James Cameron, and Fox, and it's not entirely, like, it started with, when people first became aware of it, it was like he was posting all this artwork on his Twitter account, and it's not known if he was just doing it off the cuff. Like, he was just kind of doing it just, you know, on his own time, and then people got excited about it, and then that's what got Fox interested, or if there was already something happening behind the scenes, and they were kind of like a la Deadpool, just kind of throwing stuff out there to see what people thought. But then you get, like, Ridley Scott and his Prometheus stuff involved with it, and it's the short version of the story is like it just didn't end up happening. But it's a weird little mystery about with regards to like the Alien franchise. Did you guys have any thoughts about that?
I brought it up yesterday. It is interesting because not much is known about it, other than it was discussed to be as, I always kind of like viewed it as like Alien 5. It was one of many potential Alien 5s because it seemed like it wanted to continue with Newt and Ripley and Hicks and possibly Bishop to an extent, all characters that, you know, in Alien 3 are removed from the canon. Even Hicks dies in Aliens, right?
No, Hicks is dead at the beginning of Alien 3 along with Newt.
Oh, okay.
And,
So he does get wiped out in that same batch. Okay.
Yeah, it's a bit of a controversial thing in the franchise, and the idea of Blomkamp's Alien film was it was actually going to be basically a new Alien 3, really. It was going to be a sequel to Aliens that continued that storyline and kind of brushed Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection off as being sort of bad dreams that Ripley was having in hypersleep. And I think even the title of the film was proposed as being Alien Awakening, which some people, because of Ridley Scott having kind of weird misspeakings when he's giving interviews, people thought Awakening was the name of his Alien Covenant sequel, but I think it's more likely he was referring to the Blomkamp film, given the concept.
I think so.
Yeah.
And even then, like, we know that with Ridley Scott, like, if he had his way, Alien Covenant would have been called Paradise Lost.
Yeah.
So it's not even like that was like some old title for it.
Yeah.
You know?
No.
I mean, who knows when the interview was? Maybe it was some like day one title idea. But I tend to agree. I think it was probably the Blomkamp.
Yeah, that he was referring to. And I kind of my own interpretation of what happened with that. Ridley Scott does Prometheus in 2012 and kind of covertly revives the Alien franchise, and Prometheus did well for a $150 million R-rated movie, so I think, and it obviously sets up a sequel, so I think Fox was, interested in pursuing one, but Ridley is a man of many interests, and he does all sorts of movies, and I think he was taking enough time that Fox was starting to get a little bit impatient, and so at some point Blomkamp comes along with an idea, and I think they were eager to kind of jump at it, and knowing that those gears were turning is probably what got Scott, to get his butt in gear about doing the Prometheus sequel. It's kind of how I look at it, but
I think that's likely right, because studio politics works like that way more than we would assume. Like the I don't want to call it petty, because it's business practice in truth. But yeah, that idea of like, well, we know if we get this project going, it'll get this one to start moving faster, and we're never even going to do this project because it's cheaper to not,
Yeah, that happens literally all the time.
All the time. Yeah. All of the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, if you want a really good example of studio politics, there's an article about the Jan de Bont unmade Godzilla movie. It's like a 4-part article. It's like, it's kind of amazing, some of the hoops they go through. It's like, at one point, it's like they use the movie as leverage to set up a new studio, and then it's like, and then we would give you funding to the studio if you canceled the movie. It's really, it's really ridiculous.
I guess just to touch upon the studio politics stuff real quick, Lloyd Kaufman of Troma, in the 90s, he sold the rights to a Toxic Crusader movie to New Line Cinema, and essentially it was this big thing. It was essentially New Line wanted to get the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle rights somehow. Yeah. And like their big scheme to do this involved like greenlighting Toxic Crusaders, so that way the studio that was going to do TMNT would give them TMNT. Like it was basically it was like just a ploy, and Lloyd was in the middle of it. You know what I mean? It sucks. This guy's project becomes a selling point of another project that he's not even involved in.
Yeah.
You know, and it's bizarre.
And that's why I'm hesitant to kind of assign any kind of like guilt to anybody about what happened with this Alien movie, because sometimes that's just kind of how it works. It's like as soon as Disney bought Fox, Ridley said, "Hey, you guys want me to make a Merlin movie for you? I'll do that." The Merlin movie's not getting made. It never went into production, but it was just like, "Hey, I'll do that for you," so he can get, because he knows he's still in his head, even though he's going on 90, he still kind of wants to do this Alien movie, so he's kind of just planting that seed, you know, for later. So whenever they gets around to it, What were we gonna say?
No, I was gonna ask opinion about what you think the Alien franchise is gonna be post Disney merger, but that's too big of a question for this video, so we're moving on.
Yeah,
Because that's a video all of its own.
Yeah, and
question.
Yeah, and there actually is some ideas about it, but you're right. We'll keep the subject to the Blomkamp film. There was a question that came up last night about whether or not the project would have, the Blomkamp Alien would have been good for the franchise. Because, and I'll let you guys talk a little bit about it, but it's like, is it good to erase Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, even though they're like probably the two least popular films in the Alien canon? What were some of your guys' thoughts about that?
I haven't seen either of those yet, so I can't really speak to it. But I mean, David Gordon Green's Halloween, which erased
almost all of them, basically.
Yeah, almost everything, and it did very well, and it was a good movie.
Yeah,
you know, I honestly have to agree with Justin, where I think sometimes wiping the slate clean is the best way to go, because I always think back to Force Awakens, and we're going to look back on Force Awakens in like 15 years, and we're all going to like cringe at the fact that we liked it. Because looking at it now, like these 30-year later sequels, there's like legitimately one instance where I think a 30-year later sequel is okay. It's Blade Runner 2049.
I was going to say.
Yeah, it's the only one that actually fucking made sense of why there was a 30-year gap.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of the time it doesn't make sense. Because like in the case of Star Wars, just because I brought that up, all the characters essentially did nothing for 35 years. You know, because of like the way they because in order to have it not be alien to the audiences, you can't change the characters too much. So even like any minor changes you do make to them still come across as like super minute for 30 years of time. You know, because imagine how much time like we go through change in 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I've never even lived 30 years yet. So I'm just going to say, like, you know, my father is, 50 something. 30 years ago, he was probably an insanely different person, but in the Star Wars world, he'd be the same person, because even though Han Solo was 35, now he's 75 and he's doing the same shit. And it's like,
he's doing the same thing he did in the first movie before he helped defeat the Empire.
Wearing his same clothes, like SpongeBob SquarePants.
I actually hated that. I'm like, Han Solo would be like retired on some, beach planet somewhere at this point. Like,
no, exactly. He'd be at the slots all day.
Yeah.
Just seriously. Yeah. No, he'd be just getting free drinks at the casino, gambling away his money.
Yeah. So I guess that kind of leads to the question is like,
I think financially it would have been better, because I brought this up yesterday. I think audiences would just go to see Sigourney Weaver back.
Yeah.
It's been like a long enough break period. Honestly, longer than I think we all realize. She hasn't been Ripley in like 26 years. something like that.
Yeah.
Like it's getting up there. She has not been Ripley in a long time. So, and I think, and again, I brought this up yesterday, but I think Ripley is one of those characters where you can bring her back in 30 years, and it would work. Again, I'd still recommend like a scrub of the canon, just for like convenience sake. But Ripley is a character that can age 30 years, and she would still be just as engaging. Like you wouldn't need to stunt her character.
Yeah.
To make it work, because you could have her be a completely different woman at a completely different stage in her life, and it would still be Ripley, and we'd all still grab it, because the performance of Sigourney Weaver is not about physicality. It's not about anything that is really age specific.
It's not like dragging Indiana Jones out of the crypt.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It's more about like her mental state and how it relates to the xenomorphs, and just kind of her, essentially. The Alien movies, especially with Ripley, take on this interesting perspective of her trying to find her place in the world, essentially after these like traumatic events, or place in, you know what I mean by place in the world, not Earth specific, but
sure.
Just,
I understand
her world. So like a sequel about that would be, I'd like to see it. I would like to see it. I think it would have brought in the bucks.
I feel I agree with you. I even though I love Alien Covenant, Alien Covenant did not do well financially. We have to be realistic about these things. I think the prospect of bringing Sigourney Weaver back probably would have brought in the money. I genuinely think that, but I think the other kind of big question is with regards to the Alien franchise is erasing Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, especially Alien 3, which is got something of a fan base. Is that a good idea to alienate that section of the fandom? But
it would be tough, and this is possibly another reason why they may not have gone with it, because the prequel might be a bit safer, just because the prequel series means like fans don't have, like, you know what I mean? You can still be a fan that likes 3 and 4 and consider that the end of canon, or you could be a fan that hates them and just consider Aliens the end of canon. If you bring in like a hypothetical Alien 5 or a new Alien 3, now you got canon arguments. Now you got some people upset, some not. With a prequel, it's just like, if you don't like them, ignore them. If you do like them, great. You know?
Yeah, it's kind of separated, but at the same time, I feel like Alien Covenant kind of confused people, because it's also a Prometheus sequel, and for some people Prometheus wasn't necessarily an Alien movie, and in fact legally it was a completely separate franchise until Alien Covenant came along and basically brought it into the Alien series, which is part of the reason I think why Alien Covenant wasn't called Paradise like it was originally planned to be. I think somebody at Fox Legal said, "Oh wait, you got a xenomorph, and that you have to call it Alien something." And Ridley's like, "Well, we'll call it Alien Paradise Lost," and it's like, well, that's kind of.
And then
goofy.
They said no.
Yeah,
you're not gonna call it that. Call it something else.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, Alien Covenant. And it's like, okay, cool, whatever. And then now the franchise is on ice again. So,
well, they got the television program.
Yes, that's true. That's coming out, and that'll be interesting.
The film franchise is on pause.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested to see where it goes. I hear there's some good things that are cooking, but we talked about that, and I feel like with regards to Blomkamp, basically he was asked about it at some point, about what's the status of the Alien project, and basically just said flat out, it's dead. And again, the studio politics, we don't know all the ins and outs, but it's just stuff like that happens, and it can be kind of heartbreaking in some way, especially when it's like a project like Alien, which clearly had something of an influence on Blomkamp. I mean, it had to.
Yeah, and and something I always kind of think with this, like these failed projects. I don't even want to say failed projects because that's a little too harsh. But like when these filmmakers are contracted for these big budget movies and they walk away via one way or another, like Edgar Wright with Ant-Man, we don't exactly understand it because we're like, oh, bummer, that would have been great to see that movie. These guys were working on that every day of their life for months at a time, and then one day it's just like, it's not happening, keep moving. You know, so just like that does have to be a bit of a wreck.
It is.
You know, you must learn, you need to really learn to deal with that weight, you know.
And I think the Ant-Man one is a great example because it's like at some point as these projects start to gain momentum, you eventually have to confront, you know, the money people, and the money people are going to say, so are we going to talk about the elephant in the room? And the elephant in the room for Ant-Man was the movie that Edgar Wright had been planning no longer fit with the franchise that they were creating. And yeah, it's really unfortunate. And as a filmmaker myself, it's like you can't, you know, spending so much time developing something and realizing it's not going to happen, it can be really, really crushing. So I can only imagine what Blomkamp was feeling once the project wasn't going forward. Though rumor has it,
I think though, you know, another thing though that because Sigourney Weaver worked with him on Chappie and then in his other short films, so she must have been totally fucking game. Like that's the other thing that's ridiculous because she must have believed in the idea. She must have like signed off on it to some extent, even if it was just like private conversations with Blomkamp. Like,
oh yeah, she did.
Yeah, this is a good idea. So it's a little ridiculous that they couldn't put it together for at least Sigourney Weaver's sake.
Well, I mean that was the how it got started. Actually, is like they were discussing it on Chappie, and Sigourney Weaver's that's like, oh, that sounds like a great idea, and that's, you know, part of the thing that gives it the momentum. And James Cameron loved the idea too, and he was going to help it. Scott was going to executive produce, but you know, I again, whatever happened with regards to studio politics, it's clear it was kind of, the project was used as some kind of leverage so that Scott could pursue his Alien movie, for better or worse.
I think another issue, and I don't like to be one of those guys that like makes broad statements about the studios, because again, there's so much going on. But you know, now that we know 20th Century Fox did sell themselves to Disney, you can definitely look back and see that they weren't too positive on what to do with their franchises for like a good 12 years. And the Alien franchise is one that is an example of that, because, you know, regardless on if you like the movies they made or not, looking at the behind the scenes, it does become clear, like, you know, the executives are kind of scratching their heads at what to approve and what not. Like they weren't just, not to say they were guessing, but they definitely weren't like strategic. They didn't have it all mapped out.
No, I 100% agree with you that they were kind of lost on Alien. It's like Alien 3, they killed off Ripley, and then it's like, well, now you need to bring her back for Resurrection, and
then there's the 2 AVPs. Which again, it was like which those are not. They were like they were like B movies released in MJRs.
And they're not even they're not considered to be canon with the Alien franchise. And then
or the Predator franchise.
Right? Yes, they're all 3 separate franchises. But and then it was just like and then Scott comes back and says, "Hey, I have an idea to revive it," and then with the prequel, and then that became Prometheus, and then I think you hit the nail on the head. I think Fox was a little bit lost about what to do with Alien for a while. I 100% believe that. So hopefully Disney's new management will kind of bring with it a little bit more of a focus.
I agree. I have my problems with the Disney merger, which again I'm not going to go into because I don't want to wake up with a red dot on my chest one day from my window. But I do just got to say I hope that you know, Disney has a decent track record of allowing management to do what's necessary. Sometimes it bites them in the ass, sometimes it makes them succeed. So hopefully with the Alien franchise, it enables success. And that's
Yeah.
pretty much what I got to say about that.
Awesome. I agree. Do you got any thoughts about that, Justin? We're doing two.
I'm not a big
Yeah.
franchise film fan, but yeah, I'm interested in seeing what happens next. You know, for better or for worse.
Yeah, but
Don't touch Planet of the Apes. That's what I tell Fox Disney. Don't. You're done. You're lucky that Fox made 3 good ones at the end.
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah, really. But
and I love the Planet of the Apes movies.
Yeah, no,
all of them.
Yeah, same.
Not Tim Burton's, but
yeah, I don't think Tim Burton likes Tim Burton's, but back to Blomkamp. So his Alien film didn't get made, and then he was also attached to RoboCop Returns, which didn't go anywhere, and I don't think the project is even happening anymore. Even after he left it, like they tried to get it, I think they brought in a new director, and I think it's basic.
They did.
It's dead, and I don't think it's going anywhere.
My most anticipated RoboCop thing is the RoboCop statue in Detroit that we will eventually get. Damn it! Google RoboCop Detroit statue if you're not a Michigan native and haven't heard of what's going on. But for about the past 12 years, they've been trying to make a statue and get it erected in Detroit.
I mean, do we really want to have a RoboCop statue? Because isn't RoboCop like a symbolism of like the merger?
Dude, no, I've thought about it so many times about how hypocritical having a RoboCop statue is. However, I want to stand in front of a 10-foot tall metal RoboCop. That's a city landmark. Yeah, I'll do that. Even though, there is so much like actually very wrong and disturbing.
I'm on a very superficial level. I kind of want that too, because it's like, oh, that's actually kind of cool. But at the same time, if we were like talk about the reality of RoboCop, it's kind of like, yeah, that's really fucked up.
Yeah, all I gotta say is the RoboCop 2 said Detroit would go bankrupt in 2015 and be the first city to file for bankruptcy. They got it pretty exact. Yeah. They got the year right. They got all of it right. Yep. Detroit filed for so.
Yeah, but
erect a statue of it.
Yeah, might as well. But we come to this point now. We're Neill Blomkamp now, and I think since the pandemic, the thing that he's been doing is he's made this short horror film kind of in secret, which means it's a small film. I think we said it was only like a couple $1 million or something, and I'm intrigued to see that, because horror is something that we can see in his works, but I don't outside of the old studio stuff, which I haven't seen. I don't know if we've seen a full-fledged Neill Blomkamp horror film, so that'll be interesting. But I guess kind of the big thing that we come to, having gone through the career of Neill Blomkamp, the big thing that we're at now is District 10, and where we see that going. We kind of talked about it a little bit at the end of District 9, but what theories do we have about District 10 and what that could possibly entail?
Well, so I guess the first one is at the end of D9, there is the Christopher Johnson saying he'll come back in 3 years. So just again, looking at that narratively, they have a few choices. Either A, he never comes back, it was another lie. B, he does come back after 3 years, and then stuff can happen from then. Or C, it's they have him return in more real time per the movie. Like say the movie comes out 2023, 14 years after D9, then it will be like, oh, he returned 14 years later, trip took too long. Or maybe I could see Johnson has passed, but his son has grown to, his teenage years, and maybe he comes back. There's lots of angles that it can go in, especially because District 9 does leave seeds for a sequel, but it is a pretty self-contained story. If anything, that is what kind of frightens me about the sequel, because I loved that for about 11 years we had a clean, like, District 9 was a movie that was like, yep, this is a movie, it came out, it begins, it ends, bingo. Yep. You know what I mean? Nothing else. But now it's like, okay, there is a part 2.
Yeah.
So hopefully it doesn't detract anything.
Yeah, it's the same risk that you're taking with any sequel coming out a long time after the original, like Force Awakens, you mentioned earlier, Do you leave the characters stagnating, or do you show, characters who went through the events of the first movie, and it's now 10 years after those events, so a lot of things have happened, in the meantime, and where do the characters pick up? If we have any returning characters.
We got a dog in the background. Yeah. Oh, whoops. Well, the thing for me that's really interesting is, and we were talking about it a little bit last night, was with regards, like, the world of District 9, and like Christopher Johnson's son was born on Earth and hasn't seen their home world, and it's like there's probably a lot of other aliens out there that are in a similar circumstance, and it's like, if we have a story where Christopher Johnson's coming back to help his people, it's possible there might be, like, factions. There might be some that are purists and be like, let's go back, but then there's others that are like, no, let's integrate further into Earth because this is the only thing that we know. And I think there's a lot of potential for different issues to be tackled. And I'll let you guys kind of speak on that a little bit, but one of the things that we also kind of brought up is the people's awareness and understanding of a lot of these societal issues has grown in complexity in the time since the first District 9, and that might be part of the reason why Blomkamp is even revisiting it. Is like, it might feel like the right time to go back to the well. But what are some of your guys' thoughts on that? Got nothing?
No, sorry. I was just making sure my dog was quiet. I had been muted for a little bit now, but I have to agree. Especially on the point of the first generation prawns, if you will, prawns that were born and raised entirely on Earth. I think that could be a segment of it as well. We also, the movie's title, District 10, does imply that we will see the District 10, because it was even in District 9. It was where they were being relocated to. So again, they say that was, I think, 200 miles. Sorry, my dog's at the door. So they say that was like about 200 miles from Johannesburg.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see what type of culture is developed there. Maybe in that, I don't know if that would be like more country, more plains. Like, again, they didn't exactly give its location beyond saying 200 miles from Joburg.
And is it better? Is it worse? Is it just a cover for us to
I don't know if there was like a tiny moment in District 9 where it's implied that it might actually be worse.
Yeah.
Because Christopher Johnson, he's given up at like a later point in the movie. Like, he believes the fluid is gone and there's no way to get it back. And he is like really trying to tell his son, like, we're going to have to move. We got to go here. And he's showing him pictures of the District 10 thing. Yeah. And Vickis walks in and he goes, they're actually smaller. Because his son was like, oh, they look bigger than our shacks. And then Vickis, he goes, they're actually a little smaller. So it does leave the implication that it will be worse. It might be made to look better, but it will likely be worse.
No, I can see. I can actually honestly possibly see District 10 being something like a kind of concentration camp kind of thing.
Yeah,
We're
moving to that level.
yeah, we just need to do something with these aliens, so we're just gonna
Well, I mean,
yeah.
you know, even then again with the commentary of District 9, like I can't exactly remember when it is. I think it was during one of the news segments where they're basically talking about the whole like relocation process and how they're going to be moved 200 miles away from Joburg, and it's basically like heavily showing and implying that this move only benefits human citizens of Johannesburg.
Yeah.
Like it is a benefit to that community, not the prawns. The prawns are just getting shoved out.
Yeah.
You know.
No, 100%. I mean, that's kind of really it. It's like the idea that they're being moved just because they're becoming a problem. They're an eyesore. Their activities are detrimental to what we're doing. So it's like we just want to get them out of here, and whatever you do from there, we don't care. Yeah, and it's an interesting idea, but I think in terms of kind of like just raising the stakes, I would imagine we might be seeing something like I'm imagining there's gonna be like some kind of systemic like genocide of some kind. Like we're gonna kill off some of these guys. We gotta cull the herd.
The implication of the move is pretty Trail of Tears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That didn't end too well. So.
No, to say the least. I mean that's a possibility. Thematically. Do you think there are also, another thing I'm just thinking of right now, do you think there might be a group of like people that are actually kind of like prawn rights kind of people, like humans?
That would be an interesting angle to explore. Maybe there are seeds of that as well at the end of District 9 with Vicus had the assistant, if you remember, who was a bit more timid with him. He was a human assistant. Oh my goodness, can't remember his character's name, but at the end it is revealed that he did call out MNU and he was serving time in jail because he
yeah, that's right,
revealed corruption. So there is like seeds of that planted to where like enough to like this sequel that's 10 years later, enough to be like, okay, so that guy ratted out on MNU, which kind of woke up maybe some other people like, hey, let's take a look.
Yeah.
And then who knows what that leads to again, with 10 years of time. I would hope that Blomkamp's smart and his movies haven't evolved enough worlds on their own that he does make ground covered in those 10 years of just the world.
Yeah.
Justin brought up a great idea yesterday, actually a wonderful idea yesterday, that a hypothetical District 10 opening could and kind of should be news reports catching us up on the last 15 or however many years. Like that would be the most like effective and on-brand way for the sequel to begin.
We agree that like the documentary style should continue. Yeah.
At least to an extent.
Yeah. Because Chappie, if you remember, Chappie actually started out a little bit documentary style, and then it just switched full blown traditional narrative structure, which is interesting to me. I didn't really have any feelings one way or another about it, but
it was a good way to get exposition across quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
But I mean, whatever it is. I would welcome the return to the mockumentary style.
I would too. And another thing that I hope District 10 does, and this is like going to be a little weird, and I guess this is my like filmmaker showing, but Chappie and Elysium were in 2:3:5 aspect ratio, and District 9 was actually full frame 1:8:5, and I have actually come to prefer the 1:8:5 as I have kind of
Yeah.
I've gotten like I used to be a bit more the widescreen flavor, but basically what I'm saying, Neill, because since you're certainly watching this, for District 10, please shoot in full frame, 1.85 again. I'm asking you. I would prefer if you shot in that format.
Well, it works better for the documentary.
Totally.
Format. Yeah, because documentary and CinemaScope is.
Yeah, and that's something that I can see because the documentary. It depends on the film because as you're doing this documentary approach, yeah, absolutely, that works. I think for something like Elysium, where you're looking at a bigger scope and it's a traditional Hollywood movie, you want it to feel big, and to an extent, you want to do something similar with Chappie. So I can understand those technical decisions, but if they do choose to go back to the mockumentary cell, which I feel like 100% they should. I think that the smaller frame size that you're talking about should absolutely come with it, and that's actually part of the charm of District 9 and part of what makes it feel real and not like you're watching like Star Wars or whatever. Yeah.
Totally.
Another thing that we kind of talked about last night was Vicus and Christopher Johnson and what kind of role they might play in the story. And my thought on it is, I don't. Whatever the story they're doing, my feeling is they're gonna focus on new characters, and maybe we'll get Christopher Johnson and maybe Vicus as legacy characters that show up in like supporting roles of some kind. But what thoughts did you have on the possibility of those characters returning?
I think that I think we're bound to see Vicus, if not for the sole fact that I doubt Blomkamp's gonna make a movie without his buddy Jarjosa in it. Even just for that fact alone. But also, I think with Vicus, we brought this up yesterday that his arc was kind of, again, completed at the end of District 9. But again, I was, doing a little bit of thinking about after our discussion yesterday. And I was thinking that, his arc is done in D9, but there is a lot of potential for him to have a completely different arc in District 10 as well. Because another thing that I was thinking is you got to think, compared to a lot of these other prawns, he's going to be a very intelligent prawn. I'm not trying to say that the prawns were an unintelligent race,
right?
But you got to think he lived on Earth his whole life as a human. So he is a lot more adjusted to just how our world and society functions. And again, it's heavily implied in D9 that that's part of the reason why the prawns are treated so bad, is because like at many points during the eviction process, many prawns go, "What is an eviction?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, so I'm not saying that Vicus is going to be like a warlord prawn, but like, who knows? Maybe, I'm again not saying uprising, but there's definitely room for him to have found a place within this prawn society, and what that would have done to him. It's interesting to see, or interesting to theorize on now.
Yeah, it would be interesting if he did come back as some kind of like revolutionary, because that was actually one of the things that some people did criticize about District 9 is and same thing with Avatar, was the white savior aspect of both films. So I don't know if they would continue that.
I could definitely get behind the white savior comparison for Avatar. I think that's one where it's kind of not appropriate, but you can definitely say that. I don't think that's really that appropriate for District 9, because I don't think Vicus really saves anybody.
No, he's a selfish. He doesn't care about.
He helps Christopher get away, but that's about the extent of it. He doesn't even really. All he kind of has to offer Christopher is like a few vital pieces of information. It's not like he has much of a skill set to offer. It's not like Christopher Johnson's like, I don't know how to do my alien tech, and Vicus is like, my human brain knows. No. It's just like, oh, I know where the fluid is because I was the fucking asshole who stole it.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like, You
But
know, I don't. Yeah.
no, I get what you're saying. I think more pressing for me though, and why I would rather see Vicus kind of fall more to the wayside is, for me, I think one of the most interesting things about District 9 is that Vicus just sort of disappears and nobody knows what happened to him. And that's one of my really light criticisms of District 9 is I almost didn't want to see Vicus's prawn form in the last shot. I would have almost rather just like maybe show just the hands of him making the metal flower and then just walk off, and it's like you have the out of focus. We don't really get a like he just disappears and just becomes part of the society, and humans don't
Well,
yeah.
I understand that, Matt, but I would also argue that last shot kind of does that as well, kind of gets that same feeling. Because, again, with the mockumentary feel, the shot is very shaky, much like most of the shots.
Yeah.
But it also kind of is shot like it's from the bushes, again, making you almost think like this guy was getting this footage, not even thinking it's Vicus.
Right. No.
You know what I mean?
Like I said, it's honestly it's a nitpick.
I understand. It's the tiniest nitpick you could, have on a movie like this.
Yeah. But but I'm getting at though with regards to District 10, I almost would just like want it to end there, with Vicus, and we just never. And maybe we see him again, but we don't know it's him or not. I almost do kind of just want him to have blended in with that society, and I feel like that's like the true conclusion of his arc in a way. But as you've said, and I think you brought up a really good point, I don't think Neill Blomkamp is going to do a movie without his buddy Copley. So,
because I mentioned it on the yesterday's, but I'm going to mention it again. They were like childhood friends.
Yes,
like they did know each other. They were just tight with each other back in the day in South Africa. So, you know, they're. They scratch each other's backs, I guess.
Copley and
I'll put you in my movies, buddy.
Yeah, and Copley doesn't have, as far as we know, any like formal training as an actor. Really, is just like, hey, I'm making movies. You're my buddy. You want to be in the movie, and it's worked out because he's fantastic in all of Blomkamp's films.
Oh yeah, and he's managed to make a career out of it now.
Yeah. So yeah, that is an interesting point, and it probably does hint at some kind of return for that character, for better or worse. I don't know. It really is going to depend on what the story is, and if it's going to be something.
Yeah, it's so weird because with District 10, you have a polar opposite situation of District 9 in the sense where like. I'm just going to go back in time to 2009 when District 9 came out, or say before it came out, slightly before, when it was being advertised. They had a great advertising campaign going with like the whole like this logo and all that. So and like even the disc has it.
Yes.
They had a lot of great advertising going on with that, and like the image of the spaceship over it. So it gave a lot of intrigue. So when the audiences went into it, they weren't really knowing what to expect. And they did get like such a unique flavor with what District 9 was that when it comes to District 10, we're all going to be walking in knowing that now.
Yeah.
We all know exactly what that flavor is. When that first time it was like we had hints of it, teases of it. Great marketing campaign for that movie, honestly. That whole No Humans Allowed, because I remember seeing it at the time a lot. It really jogged a lot of interest.
Yeah,
that was a really good way to grab people's attention and like immediately cue you in on what the movie's about, but really not tell you anything.
No, it's fantastic. It was an absolutely brilliant marketing campaign. I have to wonder if Sony got some kind of award or some kind of recognition from some
advertising collective.
Yeah, because those exist. So I would say that probably was at least a contender. But it does. I guess kind of we are kind of getting towards the end. But one thing I do want to kind of ask though is like, how do you feel like with District 10, like District 9 100% works as its own self-contained movie, and I would be happy if there was never another District whatever movie ever made again. Do you think District 10, do you think, let's suppose for a second, if the movie is good, do you think it would add to that franchise, and it would actually expand upon it and actually make it more valuable, or do you think it would make it less valuable, or if it's bad, do you think it would somehow reflect on the first movie? What are some of the thoughts there about that?
I think if it's bad, we still have the first movie. If it's bad, we can all just forget about it. That's my take on most franchises. Is that if one movie isn't the other movie.
Yeah,
the good ones still exist.
Yeah, right. And but I would look forward to seeing a District 10, and
yeah. Oh yeah. I'm looking forward to it too. Yeah.
And seeing that whole universe just explored further, because it is a very good world that he built in District 9.
Yeah, it's rich with details. Now, I was just kind of bringing that up because there are people out there who are like, Alien Covenant was bad, we should just reboot the entire franchise.
No. I'm not going to go that far.
There's only a few franchises that I can think of that would actually benefit from being rebooted, but that's a different topic for a different podcast.
I gotta say real quick with your how you think District 10 will influence it. So we've been talking. It's no stranger that Blomkamp has been influenced by James Cameron and Ridley Scott. We know that. And let's also real quick look at the Alien franchise and the Terminator franchise. Each of the first movies in those franchises were separated by their second movie for long periods of time. And so all I'm saying is that I guarantee at the time before Aliens came out and before Terminator 2 came out, there's lots of talk about, we already have that perfect movie. Let's leave it. There's, this is kind of funky how much time has been. Obviously there was no internet and people actually had jobs and lives, so they didn't just talk about it all the time. But I think you kind of get what I'm implying, in the sense of I don't want to go as far as to say District 10 could be like a Terminator 2.
Yeah.
Because that's a fucking big statement.
Yeah, that's
in general.
That's a high bar.
But that's a very high bar. But I guarantee before Terminator 2, there was a crass of people who was just like, what the fuck? Mm-hmm. Terminator 1 came out 9 years ago. Well, I think it was 7 years before, but whatever.
Something like that.
Quite a chunk of time for a sequel, I'd say. So I guarantee you had a school of people thinking this is going to ruin the original. And for all we know, it could be the Aliens to the District 9 franchise. The franchise we didn't know it was going to, we thought it was just one horror movie about an alien. Now it's a franchise. So who knows? It might bubble up the same, or it might be a fluke sequel. Yeah.
No, I think that's an excellent point. I think that's a very excellent point, and that I'm hoping that that's kind of what we're seeing. And I used this to kind of wrap up the show last night, and I kind of hinted at it earlier. Blomkamp to me reads as somebody who a director is just now a director who kind of found his voice very early on. He had a very, very quick splash into Hollywood, and then very quickly kind of lost it a little bit. And now it's kind of like he's trying to kind of refine his voice again, and it's a different world that we're living in. These issues and societal issues that we're seeing, the awareness around them has expanded. Our understanding of them has expanded. There's layers more of complexity. It does kind of read to me like maybe he feels like it's time to go back to that well, and I'm hoping in that we get another really great Blomkamp movie, because everything that we said at this point, we've been critical of like Elysium and Chappie and whatever, but the thing that we can say is like those are not the worst movies ever, and Blomkamp is not by any means a bad filmmaker. I just think I think he's just relatively young, and I think still not, and being from outside of the system and sort of flung in, he's still kind of trying to navigate it a little bit.
Yeah.
Did you either of you have anything to add there? No.
I just think, again, this is going to kind of echo some of the final thoughts I had yesterday. But yeah, I think Neill Blomkamp is actually a really good director. Deep down, I think sometimes people often forget that being a good director does not always equate to a good movie. I know that might sound a bit confusing. I don't want to act like I'm on some high horse here, like, oh, I direct, I get it. But sometimes, you know, the being able to handle the pressures of it is another element. And you got to think this guy is a young guy who's managed to make 3 blockbuster original idea science fiction films. That doesn't happen. That has to be saluted. You know, there's definitely a lot of inspiration to be found in his ability to kind of be this punk ass kid from Joburg and still find his footing on a major setting. And again, I take a lot of inspiration from him, especially in rewatching District 9. I didn't quite realize how much it did affect me as a young boy, but it really did leave a lot of seeds that grew to develop a lot of what my interests are. Interest in film, again, unaware, and a lot of inspiration from District 9 because it was a short film, Alive in Joburg, and I made a short film, Neutrals, and I want to turn that into a feature one day. So it is nice to see that, you know, Blomkamp can make a short film, and he's a nobody at the time, and then that short film, you know, if the idea is strong enough, it can survive for years and eventually become a feature film. So yeah, for me, of course, I want to, you know, do that with Neutrals. You know, fuck yeah, I'm gonna be inspired by it.
Yeah, and I've as a filmmaker too as well, I'm super inspired by District 9, not just as a sci-fi movie, but just like, again, the film was nominated for best editing. You know, and it's a very, very well-paced movie that has to be, you know, commended. But yeah, I agree. I think you made an excellent point just now when you're talking about the fact that he's made 3 original, not based on any previous property, science fiction films. That doesn't happen in the way that people, you know, imagine it might happen. That's actually quite an accomplishment. So yeah, I think that does speak volumes to Blomkamp's talent and his career prospects, and what he has in store for us. I think he's got more good movies in him. Did you have anything you wanted to say before we conclude, Justin?
Yeah, say kind of the same thing I said last night. Blomkamp seems to be a director who does his best when it's just his ideas that are kind of on display. It's not a big budget. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what his horror movie coming up is going to be like, because, you know, I think with a smaller budget, he can really hone in on those ideas a little bit better. Whatever he's trying to tackle with that one.
No, I agree.
Yeah, hopefully District 10 carries on the same sort of, carries the legacy of District 9 well.
Yep. And I have a good feeling about it. So I think that's the end of the show here. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, please make sure you like and subscribe to Studio Yutani. And did either of you want to do a sign off or whatever?
Check out on Instagram and Facebook at Neutrals Film. That is the short film I brought up. And on YouTube, you can find all the trailers and everything available for it. The movie is not public, but yeah, at Neutrals Film on Facebook, Instagram, and if you look up Jacob Horn Movies on YouTube, it will, you know, take you to the trailers. You'll be able to find all the info. So yeah, thanks for having me on, Matt. Really enjoyed it.
Absolutely, thank you for coming on. And with that in mind, this is Jarjosa, last survivor of the Studio Yutani podcast, signing off.